بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
We have a couple of ahadith which Marhum Zia Abadi mentions in his book. He says, for example, one hadith is لولا الحجة لساخت الأرض بأهلها. If it wasn't for the presence of the Hujjat of Allah, the Imam of the time, if it wasn't for the Hujjah, لساخت الأرض, the whole earth would become destroyed with everyone on it. So in other words, it would just turn into some kind of chaotic thing. It would entirely, become unstable, unlivable. It is the presence of the Hujjat of Allah on the earth which makes the earth stable. Another hadith is لو أن الإمام رفع من الأرض ساعة. If the Imam were to be removed from the earth, even for a moment, لما جت بأهلها. The earth would, fold and become like waves and unstable, the way the waves are in the sea. بأهلها كما يموج البحر بأهله. The way the seas have their waves and the waves crash and push things down, and another wave comes and it pushes things down. In other words, the earth would be completely unstable, unlivable, and it would basically be destroyed. So the question was that if this is the case, then what about before Nabi Adam? Yes, we know that Nabi Adam was the first prophet, and therefore he was the Hujjat of Allah. But what about before Nabi Adam? Who was the Hujjat at that time? So this is a very good question, and it has a number of different ways to respond. However, before I begin responding, I just want to make one thing clear. You see, we have a number of beliefs in Islam, okay? And these beliefs, we should basically accept them. Sometimes we don't know the very fine details about the intricacies of these beliefs, okay? And this is one of them. For example, لولا الحجة لساخت الأرض بأهلها. If it wasn't for Hujjat on the earth, then the earth would collapse or cease to be with all of its people and inhabitants. Now, what are the finer details about this? Sometimes we don't know all of the finer details. However, this thing is so much established in hadith, from the sayings of our Imams, from the sayings of our Ma'sumin, that we should accept it, and sometimes we have to admit that we don't know all of the very finer points. They have not been mentioned. Either the Ma'sumin deemed it unnecessary to mention all the points, or it would have detracted from this belief somehow. So sometimes we are looking at different ways of understanding this. So the idea is that we accept, because it's proven beyond belief, beyond doubt, because it's appearing in hadith so many times. And then the finer points, we have to say, look, Allah knows best. We can only give some ideas and theories from our understanding, from what the Quran says, from what the understanding of the ulama is, who are experts in this field, experts in hadith. So this is one general principle. However, we do have some responses, but again, these are all, they're going to be different responses, bearing in mind different things. So the question once again, who was on the earth before Nabi Adam to stabilize it? If we say that Arkan al-Bilad, you, O Imams, you Hujjats of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which includes the prophets as well, they were Hujjat of Allah in their time. Before this all Hujjat happened and Nabi Adam was created, how was the earth stabilized? The answers are as follows. The first possibility is that the earth wasn't as stable as we think. It was going through changes. It was going through different changes. It was first, as we believe, that it was covered entirely in water, and then the continents appeared, and then there were different life forms. It wasn't in a completely stable state at all. But once it became ready, then it was ready to receive the Hujjat of Allah. And once the Hujjat of Allah came upon the earth, then it really stabilized. Okay? So the earth really exists to serve and host the Hujjat of Allah, the Insan Kamil. That's the purpose of the existence of the earth. And if the Insan Kamil is not there, it would cease to exist, because it doesn't serve a purpose, and Allah doesn't do anything without a purpose. Allah, being the wise creator He is, He only does things and he only creates things which have a purpose. He won't create anything just baseless, aimless, without any reason, because that is not what a wise creator would do. So once the earth became ready to receive the Hujjat of Allah, then the Hujjat of Allah is appointed upon the earth. If it wasn't for the Hujjat, then the earth would be pointless itself and it would cease to exist. And hence, it would cease to be. So it was preparing itself in that time for this event of the Insan Kamil, the Hujjat of Allah coming upon it. And then once he occupies it and is on the earth, then it remains in a stable state. So this is one way of looking at it. But along these same lines, what one of the scholars says is that the earth, think of it as a body, and the Hujjat is the ruh. So without the ruh, the body becomes lifeless, the body becomes aimless, we bury it in the ground. So in other words, the earth can be there, but it won't function properly. So maybe before Hazrat Adam, the earth as a physical structure was there, but it wasn't functioning properly. It didn't have any life, it didn't have any function, or it wasn't running in the smooth way that we see today. So that's another explanation. Then we have a third explanation. This is from Ayatollah Ray Shahri, who himself, he has a commentary on Ziyarat Jamiah Kabira. And he gives two views. He says, look, one way of looking at this, which some people have said, is that the earth is kept intact and stabilized, not from a physical perspective, but from a spiritual perspective. In other words, the earth could be there as a physical structure, but it won't have that same spiritual dimension that it has today, because there is no Insan Kamil upon the earth. However, Agha Ray Shahri, he doesn't agree with this. He said, no, this still doesn't make sense, because all of the apparent readings of the hadith, when we read the ahadith regarding this issue, they all seem to suggest a physical stabilization, not a spiritual. So he rejects that. And then he brings the view of Allama Majlisi, who says that it is the physical earth that is intended. Otherwise, if it can be argued that spiritually the Ma'sumin have an effect upon this earth, from the Nur-e-Muhammadi, the first thing that was created was the Nur of our Prophet, and then the Anwar of Ahlul Bayt, from that same Nur, and then from that everything else was created. If that was the case, then that Nur-e-Muhammadi is there today, and we don't need an Imam today physically present to stabilize the earth. So he rejects that. So going on to his point about the physical, he says, regarding the physical earth stabilizing, he says, number one, we have assumed, so he says we have assumed that the earth was fully formed before Hazrat Adam. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it wasn't fully formed. Maybe it was going through those changes and unstable nature, and it wasn't stable. He says that's one possibility. And then when Hazrat Adam came, he stabilized it and he made it stable. Otherwise, before that, maybe it wasn't stable. The second point he says is that we have again assumed that there was a time gap between the earth being created and Hazrat Adam coming onto it. Who says there was a time gap? The Quran doesn't go into this detail. The Quran, it's not absolutely clear that there was a huge time gap. The Quran, as you know, it tells us things very, very short, and it gets to the point very quickly. It doesn't go into many details. So perhaps there was no time gap. Maybe that Hazrat Adam and the stable earth happened at the same time, and Hazrat Adam kept it stable. And the third idea connected to this is that someone may say, but the Quran says that Hazrat Adam came down upon the earth, hubut, upon the earth. So it was there. So why do we say that it could, maybe there's not a time gap? So he answers this very nicely. The ulama say that who's to say that this hubut, coming down upon the earth, is literal? Maybe where Hazrat Adam and Bibi Hawa were, in that so-called heaven or garden, it was definitely not the heaven of the hereafter, because that is only for when you have lived your life and you die and then you get your reward for your good deeds, then you go into that heaven. So it could be a worldly heaven, a worldly paradise. In other words, a place of bliss upon the earth, but a place of bliss where they were protected from the elements and they were protected from other things. And then this coming down upon the earth is metaphorical. It's not physical. It's not like he was high up and then he had to descend in that sense. No, it could be he descended in the metaphorical sense, that he came onto the earth without that bliss and without that garden and without that protection that he previously had. So that means that he was on earth anyway. Therefore, we may have assumed that there was a gap between Hazrat Adam and the earth. Maybe he was on the earth already in that garden of bliss. And then fourthly, which I think it seems the most likely actually from all of the different opinions that I've read, many scholars have said this, that perhaps the instability of the earth relates to the period in which humans were occupying the earth. Because once they occupy the earth, then they start to interact with one another, they have conflicts with one another, they have issues with one another. And these issues and these conflicts and these problems which come about between human beings, that is what could cause the instability of the earth. So perhaps this lasakhatil ard, the earth will be destroyed, relates to these issues of human beings with one another. And if that's the case, then definitely Hazrat Adam was the first of human beings, and there will always be until the end of the world a Hujjah of Allah upon the earth, and it relates to when human beings lived on the earth. So you only need a Hujjat, this is the summary, you only need a Hujjat when people are around, because Hujjat itself, the word Hujjat, means an argument and binding proof. So the Hujjat and binding proof of Allah is only needed when you have someone to prove something to, i.e. human beings. So we understand it as the time from Hazrat Adam onwards that a Hujjat is required. And we have some Quranic verses to support this view. For example, ظَهَرَ الْفَسَادُ فِي الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ بِمَا كَسَبَتْ أَيْدِي النَّاسِ. Corruption has appeared in land and sea because of what people have done, because of what their hands have done. In other words, it is people who spoil the stability of this earth. So then we have no problem at all. We can say, no, when people are around, that's when the Hujjat is required. And we also have another verse, 796. وَلَوْ أَنَّ أَهْلَ الْقُرَىٰ آمَنُوا وَاتَّقَوْا لَفَتَحْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ بَرَكَاتٍ مِّنَ السَّمَاءِ وَالْأَرْضِ. If the people of the towns had been faithful and God-wary, we would have opened to them blessings from the heaven and the earth. In other words, there is a link between what people do and the blessings available. If they had been more believers and they had been more God-wary, then there's no end of Allah's blessings that can come upon the earth. But وَلَكِنْ كَذَّبُوا, they denied. فَأَخَذْنَاهُمْ بِمَا كَانُوا يَكْسِبُونَ. So we seized them because of what they used to do. So this seems like a very solid opinion according to my humble view. So the earth with people cannot continue without Hujjat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yet another very, very interesting view of this is that who's to say that this generation of human beings, which started with Nabi Adam, who's to say that these were the first human beings? We have some hadiths which suggest that no, there have been previous Adams and previous nations before yours. And if they had that kind of intellect and free will, then definitely they would have had a Hujjat. So maybe one of the previous generations, Hujjat stabilized the earth before even Nabi Adam, but that would still have been a Hujjat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I think I'll summarize these various opinions to say that probably the strongest one is that once there are people, you need a Hujjat. So saying before Nabi Adam what was there and who stabilized it doesn't really make sense, because there was no corruption for the Hujjat of Allah to come and stabilize. And you can say there was no binding proof of Allah to be given because there was no one to give it to. Only once human beings appear, then you need a hujjah. So this is the first, seems to be more strong opinion. And the other one is that the whole point of the earth is to guide human beings, the guidance of human beings. And if there is no guide, then that guidance can't be completed and it can't happen. So therefore, the earth serves no purpose, and therefore it would not continue, and the plan of God would not happen, which is impossible. So therefore, there has to be a hujjat. However you look at it, there has to be a hujjat, either for the plan of Allah to continue and the earth to serve a purpose, or to provide guidance to people, you can say, or you can say that the hujjat of Allah is needed because when there are people on the earth, they have to have the binding proof of Allah, and the hujjat of Allah, the insan kamil, whether a prophet or an imam, is that binding proof. So these were the different views and opinions. I hope that's clear. I know we have looked at different things, and I've summarized it extremely short.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد